What's up guys, Gear Tricks here, and today we're going to be talking about ND filters. Do you need one? Should you skip out on them? Before we start though, let me say that this is going to be more of a photography viewpoint than an overall viewpoint, because if this were about video, then in reality I'd say get a variable ND and make sure you have both the shutter speed and the aperture you're looking for the style you're going for. But with that being said, this is going to be more focused on photography, and it's actually going to be focused specifically on this 10-stop ND filter I just bought. So I'm comfortable using 3-stop, 6-stop, 10-stop NDs. I've actually never personally used a variable ND, although I know they're better for video. But it's going to focus mostly on, do you need a 10-stop ND? Not a 3-stop, not a 6-stop, a 10-stop, because 3-stops are pretty important in everyone's kit. 6-stop are a little more artistic, and these 10-stops, they're not used at all for video, from what I can tell. They are solely used for long exposure photography, and sometimes you can get 7, 8, 9, however many minutes you want with the 10-stop ND filter. So today I'm going to be shooting with the A7R3, and on that I have the EPZ 18-105, so we're going to be shooting in Super 35 mode. And then on top of that, I'm going to be attaching a polarizer, and I'm going to be attaching a 10-stop ND, so it's going to be slightly more than 10 stops. So we're not really going to be talking about calculations or exposures or anything like that. This is not a guide on NDs. This is more of a, should you buy an ND? Now, let me just get it out of the way and say, yes, you should buy an ND for video. I said that in the beginning, and I will say that 1,000 times over. ND filters for videography are so unbelievably important, especially if you're looking for that fast aperture that everyone is. But on the photography side of things, they become a little less important. In the middle of the day, they allow you to do long exposure photography, so if you're shooting in a crowded place, you can maybe try to blur out some people that are moving. If you're shooting in a location like this midday, you can maybe try to glass over the water while still keeping the sky nice and bright. But at the end of the day, you do not need an ND filter. These things really are for the extra artistic level, or the extra step in the photography process to take you one step farther. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're useless. Obviously you can't use them for video, like I said before, but when it comes to photography, sometimes when you're out specifically in the middle of the day, there's just not as many compositions as you want during something like, golden hour or blue hour, where you can maybe even run a slightly long exposure without an ND filter. But during the middle of the day, your options are kind of limited. So here I'm going to show you an example of me using the 2 filters on this camera and shooting this scene away from the sun, and we're going to see the best we can do. Now, some of you may be asking, why are you using a circular polarizer if shooting away from the sun? Well, this actually has to do with one reason and one reason only. I have a 72mm step-up ring for a 72mm lens. I have a 77mm ND filter, circular polarizer, which is stuck on that step-up ring. So the step-up ring and the polarizer are kind of one-on-one right now. So I'm using that, and I'm also going to be putting the ND filter on top of it. Now I know the polarizer is just going to create a color shift, and it's going to create a longer exposure. I'm already aware of all of that. That's why this is not going to necessarily be a scientific example on how to shoot the 10-stop ND. It's more just going to be some example shots I've taken with it, and I hope you guys enjoy. So very quickly, there's actually a few accessories I'd recommend when shooting with the 10-stop ND filter. So one, obviously the tripod. If you don't have a tripod, I wouldn't even recommend trying this. 2 is a wireless shutter release. This allows me to put the camera on bulb mode and hold it from here, so I don't have to touch the tripod and introduce any camera shake. This is an accessory, this is more of a tip. I would recommend setting both the exposure, I would recommend setting both your manual focus, and I would also go into your camera settings and to make sure it doesn't go to sleep while you're applying the ND filter, because on my Sony camera, for example, if this falls asleep, the lens will actually go back from 28mm where it is right now to 18, and I'll have to reset that, as well as the manual focus. So do not let your camera fall asleep in this process. That'll really slow you down. Okay, so for step 1, I've put my polarizer on, and I've made sure that the color of the sky is exactly where I want it. Now I'm going to apply the ND filter on top of that, and I'm going to set my exposure correctly. So I know this is obviously counterintuitive to all the tips I just gave you, but I actually want to make one more little suggestion. So if it's nice and bright out like it is today and there's not many clouds and there's not much overcast, and let me just say that it's actually starting to be golden hour right now, so the lighting's not even ideal or at its peak. I would recommend maybe trying to do an exposure at 25 seconds, 30 seconds with the 10-stop ND, because in the middle of the day, chances are that will be good enough. Now, this is, I think, at f8, so I could even drop that down to f4, have that go down to 7, 8 seconds, things like that. But right now, a 30-second exposure, f8 ISO 100 is getting me a perfect exposure. So sometimes the wireless remote is actually not even needed. Now, in 10, 15, 20 minutes from now, I'm actually going to be using that to do 2-3 minute exposures on this. But for right now, the 30-second exposure, f8 ISO 100 is working perfectly. So I know this is completely a side point to where this video is going, but I would also like to recommend that sometimes the 3-stop NDs really do get the job done. I use my 3-stop ND every time I'm doing a time lapse or whatever, and this allows me to get the water to start glassing over a little bit earlier in the time lapse. Now, unfortunately, the RX100 just has a 3-stop ND, not a 6-stop, not a variable, nothing like that, so I'm very locked at what I can do with this, but this thing has really showed me the importance of ND filters, and without this, I don't think I would have been where I am today really caring about them. I probably would have been in the camp of you don't need them. But this little thing has shown me how much you really do need them. Okay, so I think I've taken as many shots as I can of this one composition. Now I'm actually going to aim it towards the sunset where the clouds are actually covering the sun right now, so I'm going to see how this ND filter is able to handle all that. This is where the polarizer is going to shine though, because I'm hopefully going to be able to pull off all the shine on the top of the water and really pull out those colors, so hope for the best, right? With this composition though, it was nice. Within maybe 2-3 minutes of shooting, I went from 30 seconds all the way up to a 50-second exposure, and I'm about to check that right now. See, and as of right now, the 50-second exposure is at the same part on the histogram as the 30-second exposure was 3 minutes ago. That's how fast golden hour is progressing. So not only is a 10 ND stop filter challenging to begin with, but when you mix it with golden hour and rushing for time, you're really fighting the settings to get those good shots. So I'm going to quickly turn this towards the sun, as I said, and let's just get this going. I'm going to do that quick, and then I'll actually probably try to film the rest of this at the house because I am running out of time. So I just wanted to add something really crazy I noticed. So with the A7R3, I actually said that you should do manual focus before putting on the filters. While I still stand by that for the most part, I'm shooting directly towards the sun right now, and even with the ND filter on at a 30-second or bulb exposure, the EVF or the live viewfinder is actually showing me, for the most part, what is in focus. It's a little blurry, it's very grainy, but I definitely can tell where the depth of field is. So I still recommend manual focusing beforehand, but if something happens where you change composition or you need to change focus afterwards for focus stacking, I don't think it's actually impossible to do it all with the filters on the lens. So I'm going to start with a 30-second exposure again, just to see how this does with the scene, and obviously I'm expecting that to be a little bit too dark, and if it is, I'm going to use my timer and the remote shutter, and we'll pick it up, and then we'll see where the correct exposure lies. So as I said before, because we were shooting away from the sun and now we're shooting into the sun, the 30-second exposure actually worked perfectly. I'll show that image here. Now, it's not the composition I'm happy with, so I'm going to keep working on it, and I might actually tweak the polarizer a little as well to really get the look I'm going for. But you get the idea. Shooting with the 30-second exposure to figure out where you are is almost sometimes just as good as taking that 1/8000 test shot and then doing the math. Because sometimes when you do those test shots, you just cannot imagine or visualize what the ND filter is going to do to movement. Okay, so the day is slowly wrapping up now, and there are a few things I want to say about the 10-stop ND filter. For starters, do you need one? The obvious answer, even before you clicked on this video, was no. You don't need a 10-stop ND filter. Now, do you want one ND filter at least in your kit, I would argue yes. Both for video, which is 100% a necessity to get a variable ND filter, or even for photography to just give you some more options when you go to places that you're getting bored with, or even give you more options in general when you go to a location that really has so much potential. You know, anywhere with water, I mean, this is a great example of a place to use an ND filter. Some other great examples for the 10 stop would be, you know, public tourist attractions and maybe places that people keep moving and funneling, so you can hope to fill in the blanks with the long exposure. But I will say, I'll play devil's advocate for it. 10 stop ND filters give you a style of photo that is long exposure. 3 stop, 6 stop, they give you the glossy effect, but I promise you, when you put a 10 stop ND on and you're in the 50-second exposure range, 2-minute, 3-minute, 7-minute range doing fun things like that, I don't think there's much of a comparison with the style of your images with the lower ND filters. The style alone that comes from a 10 stop ND filter could be the reason that you should pick up a kit. Now, if to you that's not really that appealing, or it never really spoke out to you as something that you want in your kit or part of your art, then skip it. What does it really matter? Get a polarizer, get better lenses. You can really do whatever you want. But for the people who see long exposures and just feel that they want that in their portfolio, I really don't think you can sleep on the 10 stop ND filter. Now, obviously you should get a good one, don't want color cast, but at the end of the day, 10 stop in itself is a great choice for an ND filter, especially for your first one. Okay, let's see, that should be enough light, hopefully. So I'm freezing. It's, I think, like 7 o'clock now. I'm probably gonna stay here till 9 o'clock shooting a little bit of astrophotography. I'm just gonna keep that out of this video because I can already tell now that the composition I'm gonna get is solely just to test this lens. There's not a good composition, there's not a good bit of stars, there's not a set of constellations that I'm going for. I'm literally just pointing this camera up and praying for the best. But I'm tired. Obviously, as you can see, there's not much more light to vlog or show you guys any more information about the ND filter, and I've actually stopped using it about 30 minutes ago, and I'm still now doing 45-minute exposures without the ND filter at f4, so the light's gone. Unfortunately, that's the end of the ND video, but I think I'll meet you guys back home tomorrow and we'll pick this all up, and if I didn't conclude why you should buy an ND, I think tomorrow I'll definitely be on the side of getting one. So, Gear Tricks out. Actually, I guess I'm not out. You guys are going to see more of me. But for me, I'm out for the night. So, good night. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. And I hope you guys enjoyed. That whole last clip was in manual focus set to infinity because I was just recording the stars. So, fuck me, right? Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys can take something from this video. But as you guys can see, it's way too dark. So, I'm going to pick this back up at home tomorrow. So, see you guys then.